Hi, everybody. Welcome to the office hours for OMS-CS 6300. And Alex here, as usual. And also, as usual, I got Erin and Will with me virtually. So I'm going to let them say hi, and I'm going to let them give you the update on the grading. And then I can go back with my announcement, and then we'll start with the question. We have a number of questions, so we'll try to go through them without too much delay.
Well, for the grading for the UML assignment, the TAs are working through it. We just had a meeting and discussed some issues, and they're making progress. So hopefully we'll be more or less on track with getting those done. So that's for me.
The A3, I was working on uploading that just before this, but it didn't quite release beforehand. So you should see that like probably 20 minutes after this ends. And the A4, I still need to check a couple exceptions, but that's all pretty much there. I just need to check a few of the exceptions, and with the long weekend, I should get that out as well. So yeah, sorry, that's a little bit behind where I said last week. It's been interesting. It's an interesting semester.
All right. So in terms of my announcement, I don't have much. It's just the usual check of the schedule. So we are on week 7, and so we have the group project deliverable 2 due this weekend, and this Friday night as usual, Saturday morning Atlanta time, and then we're going to have the next deliverable, which is deliverable 3, then deliverable 4. So the next couple of weeks are not shouldn't be big surprises, because we're just continuing with the project, and we're going to go through the additional phases of UML. Okay, having said that, I guess at this point we can go to the questions, and let me start from the beginning. Looking forward to a grading update. I guess we gave you that was satisfactory. And now we have the next question, which is in the project plan, what kind of activities are expected as part of the process description? Also, what are the roles? What all roles are required to be played by team members? And then there's actually several follow-ups. One is asking whether in the project plan, project description as a set of activities refers to activities such as creating a scramble. No, because we're talking about process activities, not activities from the user. To add to this, does activity refer to the RUP phases, or does it refer to operation in the class design? Okay, same answer, and I'm going to give a general answer, so I want to make sure that I go through the follow-ups. Or are the activities the ones described in the iterations, basically? Analysis, create design, and so on. After my consideration, I think that Jose said what Jose said is right. My question is, I feel like it could be a very general answer, so I wonder how can we specify or customize for our group project. Okay, so the answer here is what the document is asking you to provide is the set of activities you perform in the process to build the system, to create the system, which means basically anything that you will do towards the final delivery of your software. So it's fine if you just mention the UML activities. It's fine if you mention the traditional software engineering activities that you're going to do, design, development, testing, and so on. So as long as it makes sense and it represents what you're doing in the project, that's fine. That's what we're looking for. So don't worry too much about it. Just make sure that you describe what you're actually planning to do and who's going to do that. In the project plan document, section 3, we are supposed to describe each team member's role. Could you give us an example of the roles? Are the roles like project manager, developer, tester, or is the role the team members essentially a list what everybody is responsible of work split? What if everybody's going to participate in each of the tasks? So now the role is the former list that you provided. So project manager, developer, tester. So it's this kind of traditional roles, and it could be that multiple people are going to do. So for example, that everybody's going to be a developer. That's perfectly fine. There should be only one project manager. It could be that more than one person is going to do testing. You could have some kind of document manager, or just identify the roles. And and the traditional ones are the ones that are mentioned here, and kind of to the best of your knowledge, to the best of your planning so far, who's really going to do that. And as I said, if multiple people are going to do the same role, or if everybody's doing everything, ideally that won't be the case. But if everybody's going to do everything, then that's what you should put in the document. So this should not be basically something that you make up for the sake of having documentation, but should really describe what is doing what in your project and what are the different activities, as which was the point from the previous question. Can you please explain supplementary requirements with example? So the use cases normally do not give you a chance of describing, for example, non-functional requirements. So this is something that will go in the supplementary requirements. So I'm not going to give you a specific example, because otherwise that will end up being in every document. But you can think about, again, any non-functional requirement you can think of, you can put it there. If you think that your use cases contain everything that you need in terms of requirements, it's fine if you just say so in the document. How detailed should our test case selection be in the test plan document? Should we be aiming to generate a detailed list of our possible test cases, or are we aiming for something less granular? So you should have basically enough test cases to really test the functionality. So again, imagine this, and I think, this might be kind of a trivial, but I think a lot of teams might not be thinking about this in the right way. As I said, just think about this as something that you're doing really for the sake of the project, and not because you have to turn in an assignment. So you will have to test your code. So think about what do you think would be an adequate way of testing your code, and put all the test cases that you think would be necessary there. And I think that's really the best way to go about this. So there's not really a specific number of test cases I'm expecting to see, but I would expect that with the list of test cases that you have, if you run them and they all pass, you should have enough confidence that your software works correctly. And hopefully this system is not particularly complicated, so it should be the case that you're not going to need 10,000 test cases to get a decent amount of coverage, to get some adequate set of tests. Also, we are looking into our state diagram. Should we take into consideration Android lifecycle methods? Specifically, should we consider on pause, on create, on resume as separate states? No, it's. I think this was asked before, so that's really an implementation detail. So you should not reason at that level. Okay, next question. Can you elaborate what is included in this diagram? Is it showing runtimes, the platform infrastructure, the flow of data? So this is actually covered in the lectures. So because if you look at the document, what it tells you is that you have a component diagram and a deployment diagram, and the template also describes what these diagrams are. So for the component diagrams, for example, says that these diagrams shows the various components and how they're connected. So imagine this being something at a slightly higher level of abstraction. So a component would be a set of classes and how they operate together. And for the deployment diagram, it will just be, it's just a diagram that tells you where each component is going to run if you have, for example, multiple nodes in your system. And as the document says, it might be that you won't need to have a component diagram and a deployment diagram. So if you feel like that's superfluous, do that and justify it. Otherwise, you can build them, and again, according to the way they're described, both in the lesson and in the templates. And if you look at the lesson, I'm pretty sure, if I recall correctly, the way I also provide the example, so you should see exactly what kind of component and what kind of diagrams we're talking about. Can you go into detail about the grading criteria for each of the documents being created for this deliverable? It kind of seems we're on our own in some aspects to figure out what we need to put in it, and it's expected that this documents evolve over time. But if that is the case, it's hard to understand what the expectations are, since it feels very subjective. So these are documents where there's a lot of, so there's many ways to get them right, many ways to get them wrong. So there is some subjectivity involved in a sense, but and that's also the reason why we don't want to give you an exact kind of rubric and an exact set of points that we're going to be looking at, because we feel like it will be basically, well, first of all, somebody might misinterpret that and build the document in the wrong way, and second, we don't want everybody to do the same thing just to satisfy the rubric. So basically, all you need to do is follow the instructions. These are supposed to be simple documents. So we took the original, I think it was IEEE template, and we really simplified them a lot. So what you have there is pretty much bare bone kind of amount of information that you need for different aspects. So project plan, the test plan, and so on. So I will just try to understand what the document asks you to do, look at the descriptions, and do it to the best of your capabilities and to the best of your abilities, and you really should be fine. So don't worry too much how we're going to grade that. It's true that some part of it is subjective. There's many ways to do it. You can improve them over time. So just do what makes sense to you. If you have doubt, ask, and don't worry too much about the specific grading criteria, because this is the typical thing that we're going to grade with a grain of salt, because there is a lot of variability. To what depth should we go into the test plan document? We only have covered unit testing in the course so far, but the document also talks about integration, system regression tests, as well as white box testing and many other things. So if you could please clarify what's really necessary as far as the test plan is concerned for this group project deliverable. And there's a follow-up that says, I guess we need to go through courses about white box, black box testing. Yeah, unfortunately, here's a little bit of a kind of chicken and an egg problem. Or maybe it's just, it's not that complicated because it's not really cyclic, but basically you will need to, so if you don't know enough about testing, you'll need to see the lectures on testing before preparing the document, or read something about testing before preparing the document. So my suggestion would be, and unfortunately that's the way it works out because of that, we try to do so that, you already take all the lessons that you need before doing the various parts of the project. That works 99% of the cases. This is a case in which you need to know a little, possibly you need to have some knowledge that you can acquire later on to do this. So two considerations. One is that ideally in the prerequisite for the course there is some basic knowledge of software engineering, so you should have an idea of what testing is, and so that it might be that you will be able to do the documents without looking at anything else. And if that's not the case, you can really jump ahead and invest a couple of hours in watching the testing lectures. You will have to look anyways, and use the information there to do these deliverables. So and as before, if you have questions, feel free to ask. And in terms of the level of detail, we understand that you haven't officially taken the testing or you haven't officially seen the testing lessons here, so we're gonna be lenient in terms of the generic part of the initial part of the document. What we expect to see though is at least, so in terms of the set of test cases, we expect to see kind of a good set of test cases that covers the application in an adequate way, and that should be able, if you know what testing means, you should be able to do that even without knowing all the details of the different techniques. So I hope that's the case. I hope there's they can help answering the question. Otherwise, please feel free to follow up, and I'll be happy to provide more details. Is the extra requirements just a list of words like scalability, testability, etc.? No, it should actually be a set of requirements. So it should be a little bit more than then the word, I mean, I guess the word is almost implies, if you say scalability, you say the application should be scalable, but you know, the requirements should also be checkable. So if you just say the application should be scalable, how are you going to ensure that the application is going to be scalable? So imagine this document being some sort of contract that describes what you're going to build. So make sure that in addition to saying what the quality is that you're specifying, you also say how that's going to be measured. In the use case description, shall we mention the general scenarios from the user's perspective, like the user enters a base, or relate the scenarios to our design, like which class object gets updated in the database? Now, you should do it from this is a description of the functionality of the system, so you should describe it from the user's perspective. So it's really basically a way of describing what happens to the system in the various kind of usage scenarios. Can we use application features to define roles, like game logic? Yeah, I guess, you know, again, I think we're fairly flexible. So just make sure that you also cover at least the more traditional roles, so that somebody's going to be in charge of the development, somebody's going to be in charge of the testing, somebody's going to be in charge of writing documentation. But if you also want to kind of refer to specific parts of aspects of the application, that's, you know, that can be fine. I mean, I just wouldn't overdo it. I mean, you can don't get to the level of details in which you're describing every single part. So it's fine, and it's good enough to just describe the general rules. If I raise a non-functional, I'm reading the follow-up. If I raise a non-functional requirement like response time of a particular function, do we have to test it at a later time or just leave it there? So ideally, there should be a test for the requirements, if you can, because you want to show that, you know, you actually cover them. And so I will guess, you know, the answer is if you put there non-functional requirements, it should be testable, and possibly, you know, ideally there should be a test that checks it. Next question: is it necessary to provide a use case diagram? Whatever we can think of seems trivial. The use case description should be good enough. Is it okay? Well, actually, the use case descriptions don't make sense in the context of the use case there. So I see what you mean, in the sense that, you know, you may feel like, you know, the core, the meat of the document is really the use case description, which is true. But the use case diagram is actually normally relatively simple, in the sense that what you're showing is actors and the pieces of the functionality or the features they interact with. So it's fine if it's not particularly complex, or you're not building a state machine, you're not building sort of an object diagram, you're not showing a sequence diagram, the interactions. You're just basically saying there is this piece of functionality, these are the actors that are interacting with it. And then the description is what really tells you what the system does. But the diagram should be there as well. For test plan 1.3, adequacy criterion, define how you're going to assess the quality of your test cases. Typically, this involves some form of functional or structural coverage. Is there a difference between functional coverage and structural coverage? If so, what is it? Okay, let me see the follow-ups. So if there's a question, an answer that is correct, I will just point to that. I think functional coverage involves black box testing, and structural ones involve white box testing. That's the correct answer. You will get the answer after reviewing course P4L2 and P4L3. Are we expected to have completed all of the Udacity lessons at this point? So now you're supposed to just have followed the schedule. So I mentioned that before, so I'm not going to repeat it, but basically, you know, feel free to jump ahead if you want to have a better understanding of testing at this point, or otherwise you can just use the knowledge that you have. And we're going to kind of be a little, you know, more lenient than we will be otherwise, because we understand that you don't officially have taken the testing lessons at this point. And in terms of the difference between functional and structural coverage, that's exactly what Rembrandt said, which is functional is basically black box, structural is white box. So functional, you're focusing on covering the functionality. Structural, you're focusing on covering the code. Because we don't have a prototype code base yet, is it acceptable to create functional black box test cases and not that will add structural white box test cases once we have a prototype. So okay, there's two things at play here. One is the criteria that you're going to use. So you can define that you will use a structural or white box criteria, even if you don't have the code yet, which means that once you have the code, you will use it. In terms of whether you'll be able to look at your coverage criteria and add new test cases because for example, you find out that the coverage is not high enough, then definitely you're right that you're not going to be able to do that until you have a prototype or an initial release of the code. But as I said, nevertheless, you can still talk about structural criteria that you're going to use. But yeah, you won't be able to measure it. In fact, if you look at the what is required for this deliverable, is just for the test cases, for the test plan. You just have describing the test cases, but not the results. So it is assumed that you're not going to be able to run the test cases, and therefore you're not going to be able to measure coverage either, at least a structural one. Just as a quick clarification, does UI unit testing count as a white box or black box testing? So if you do UI unit testing, and ideally you will be doing that based on the specified functionality, so that will tend to be a black box kind of testing approach. On the other hand, you could think of techniques in which you do UI testing, but it's driven by what covering code, so it could also be white box. But I think in the way you mean it here, it will be maybe a black box approach. Since these team deliverables don't seem to get a grade assigned to them on per deliverable basis, can you provide a brief overview of how they fit into the final grading or evaluation of our team project? Yeah, so basically you can just think about every document receiving a percentage of the grades. And I don't know if Will or Erin remember from last semester, because maybe we kind of fine-tune that every semester, but we have a rough idea. So do you remember how much we counted the different documents? Erin or Will?
I do not. It changes a bit each semester.
Yeah, they're
I'm pulling up the grade book.
So we can give you a rough idea.
They're not all the same because there's just so many things checked on the group project.
So we're I'm sorry, the question is how much does what count? The documents in phase 2?
The question is, so basically it's how much points are these documents, is these deliverables worth? Because basically, if so, I guess let me just add something, Will, before. So if you're talking about somehow, I was reading this in terms of documents. So if you think about it in terms of deliverables, what we check for the deliverables is just that you submitted something reasonable, and then we're going to grade the final version of all the documents.
I would expect the material in each deliverable to be approximately somewhere between 15 and 30 points. And I know that's a wide range, but with that in mind, every deliverable you turn in basically a first draft of something. And if it's a placeholder or, you really didn't finish it, then we'll grade that version. But if you've finished it, you can keep updating it, you can improve it, you can correct it for your later phases, and then we grade what it is at the end.
Yeah, exactly. What you turn in at the end is what we grade, unless you submit placeholders, in which case you lose those points for that phase. And what we had last time was approximately on the closer side to 15 points for 1 and 3, and on the closer side to 30 points for 2 and 4. That's how it worked out last time. It does shift from time to time, so I'm not going to swear it's going to be like that again this time, but that's what we did last time.
And I'm gonna repeat my usual point, which is, at this point you'll probably be sick and tired of hearing it, but in a sense, the general guideline should really be, try to do a good job, and you'll be fine. Which I know it's sort of obvious, but really we value and we're open to discuss anything about the grading, in the sense that you have a chance of kind of getting back to us if you think that something was not graded fairly and so on. So as long as you do a good job with the documents, all you have to worry about is the fact that for every deliverable you do the work, and that the final ones reflect what you really want to see in the documents. And so basically the design documents is the actual design of the system. The test plan is a nice laid out test plan that cover the code that you have resulted and so on and so forth. And if you do that, there should be nothing to worry about in terms of grading. In the test plan document, does integration testing also include testing with external web service? It could, in the sense that that would be definitely a case of integration. And so if you consider that to be an important part, it makes sense to have test cases for that. And you classify them as integration. Could you provide a range of examples of the types of requirements that should be listed in the extra requirements? So that was asked, earlier on, and the answer is the same, which is basically non-functional requirements. So anything that cannot be discussed in terms of functionality of the application. You can think about performance requirements. Don't stretch it, or don't overdo it, because again, it could be that for your system there's nothing that should go there. Normally, you can always define some of the non-functional requirements, but if you feel free to say so. And otherwise, it should be something that this kind of targets, addresses this non-functional aspect of the system: maintainability, testability, so all these liabilities that you have in software quality. So I hope that makes sense. Otherwise, as usual, feel free to follow up. Should there be text diagrams for the top level items 1, 2, 3 below in the design document, or does having text and diagrams for subpoints 1.1, 1.2 provide adequate detail for design purposes? Okay, so design considerations, architectural design, low-level design, text and diagrams. Okay, so we're talking about the design document. Okay, let me just double check. I think I know what you're asking, but let me double check on the document to make sure. Where's my design document? Here it is. Okay, so if you're asking about whether something should go in basically 1.0, which is the first part after the main sections, no. So this is just provided as sort of a general description of what's going to be in that section, but it's fine if you just provide the diagrams and the details for the subpoints. Then there is an empty question here, which I don't know. Do you guys see it as empty as well?
Yeah, I think he probably deleted a repeat question.
Yep.
Okay, so this I guess was deleted. Maybe it was asked before. At this stage of our team design, is there a quantity, number of test scripts that sounds appropriate or complete? We're just trying to triangulate around how many should be documented in section 2 of the test plan. Thanks again. No, there's really not a number that I have in mind. As I said, the system is relatively simple, so you shouldn't really end up with hundreds and hundreds of test cases. But it's hard to give a number because the systems can be very, very different. As I said before, just think about the functionality of the system. For example, if you're using that kind of criteria, and you should have enough test cases to check the main functionality, the corner phases for each phase of functionality. So you can take the use case as a starting point, and you can derive test cases from there, for instance. Okay, there's another one that is resolved. We have written documents using Dillinger, and it shows very well. When we got the same file and viewed it on Markpad, it was very distorted. What software do you use to view the files?
I would take a look at it in GitHub honestly, there's several varieties of Markdown, but since your files are being put in GitHub, if they weren't there, they should be good. We're probably using a variety of different pieces of software, but that's usually the variety we aim for. So like GitHub flavor Markdown. And don't use like active web links, because if we download the things and they're looking for web links that didn't come down with your repository, they might not connect to anything. So I think those are basically the two things you should be concerned about for us reading your documents.
Yeah, and you know, and if you use the, well, I guess, you know, if you use something else and there is a kind of a good justification for why we're not seeing the right, you know, everything that we're supposed to see, we'll work with you. But I think, you know, following Erin's suggestions will make it, you know, easier for everybody. Is a person in project manager role described in project plan document supposed to submit the document, or it can be someone else? Now, I mean, in theory, yes. In practice, it can be someone else. So we call it the person project manager for the turning of the assignment, just because we needed to name somebody basically, and we needed to make sure that there was only one submission per team, so one and only one submission per team. But it's fine if you have someone else responsible for submitting a document. We're not going to go and check whether the person you put as program manager is the actual kind of person submitting. Should be the actual program manager, but it's not necessarily the one who has to submit on T-Square. Another one from my group. Is it necessary to represent the external web service utility in the use case diagram? Let me see. Is it necessary? I would probably show it, but let's see, you know, what Erin and Will think. Because to me, it's an external sort of actor, but you know, you could also think about integrating into the system. So I think either way, I'm fine either way.
Yeah, I don't think we've usually required one way or another, but I have seen a fair number that will put it as, sometimes they don't call it the external web service because that's more the class. Sometimes they'll say it's like central server or something. Basically, they're just showing that there's a networked other, I guess, that also affects things. I've seen it labeled a variety of ways. It's a bit odd, but
yeah, and you know, and for these things, and again, in some cases, there's not really a right or wrong answer. So both make sense to me, and both can be justified. So I guess do the one go for the solution that makes most sense to you. When saying you can modify the MD files as you progress, but turn in your first version on time, how would you verify that in grading? I'm basically asking for just in case the diff, some of the files significantly changed. So if you're asking us how we verify that in grading, so we can make sure that you know, since you submit a commit ID, that you know, we can look at the commit ID and look at the corresponding document. And the fact that the documents might change is actually fine, because we understand that in the process of developing the system, creating the system, you end up understanding better and better the requirements and how to do things, and so it is very possible that things might change. So it's fine in a sense. One of the goals of this is also for you to experience and for us to see sort of these effects of, you know, evolution of the documents, how it is hard to come up with the right design and plan and everything at the very beginning before you really kind of build, not build, but you know, before you really get into the, let's say, the creation of the system. So it's fine if you have to modify the documents, even if you have to modify them quite a bit, because in a sense that's part of the plan. Is it okay to show two separate nodes in a deployment diagram, even if they exist on the same device, just because they're connected in a certain way? I will not show separate nodes for things that are on the same device, but maybe you can provide an example of what you mean, and I can, have a further look at it. But I will, in general, I will try not to do that. Okay, there's no more questions for now. Let's see if something comes up. In the meanwhile, I'm trying to think whether there's any further announcements that we should make. I don't think so. Well, I guess, yeah, I'll use this time just to, at this point, I'm going to give you weekly reminders to let you know that, if you're interested in, for the sake of science, if you're interested in being part of the of a study, we will use assignment 6 for that purpose. So, and I'm going to provide more details, but basically, we will give you a version of the tool that you have to use for the assignment, instrumented so that we can collect information about how you use the tool. It's you'll do it, only if you want to do it. So there's no absolutely, there's no requirement that you do that. But as I said, if you want to be part of the study and you want to, kind of end up helping what we hope will become a paper later on, this is your chances. So as I said, I'll mention that again in the upcoming weeks, and I'll spend some more time on it when we actually start. So the week before we start the black box testing assignment. All right, it seems like nothing else is popping up. Aaron, Will, you want to add anything?
Yeah, this lets me get started on the office hours for the other class very soon.
Yeah, it's a Wednesday night for Will. Is like yeah.
Well, normally it's Thursday night, but we have an exam opening up, so I gotta move them.
Oh, I see. So that's not the standard time. Okay. So Wednesday and Thursday are your office hours days.
I would say we had a question or two about the team manager submitting. Like, you don't have to tell us who they are, each deliverable. The only reason we're ever going to notice who's turning stuff in is if 2 people turn in different things for your group. And that's a problem. Don't do that, and it's all fine. It'll just get pulled in by our tool, and we'll never notice.
Okay. So I guess we have the in terms of stuff that we do at every office hours, we have like the Aaron's message moment. We haven't seen yet what the T-shirt says.
Yeah. Let's see. It says well, now it's covered with cat hair. Software development process. Step 0, I can't fix this. 01, crisis of confidence. 02, questions career. 03, questions life. 04, oh, it was a typo. Cool.
Oh, it's the 5 stages of the software development process.
Yeah. Yeah. And
and
properly numbered.
A T-shirt dedicated to the class, but I was a little surprised by that. So I'm glad there's something else underneath. Will, anything you want to show?
Yes.
Any message?
I'm just wearing a plaid shirt here. That's I don't really have anything.
Actually, Will and I are almost coordinated. Besides the hairstyle. So.
Wow. Yeah.
Next time we'll exchange email before.
Aaron, next semester, this is the official hairstyle for next semester. Just letting you know.
No.
Yeah, but will be quite a stretch for Aaron. It seems like.
No.
All right. Then I guess on this happy note, bye everybody. There's no more questions, so we'll see you all next week. We'll see you on Piazza. Feel free to keep asking questions, keep participating in the office hours. Actually, this maybe because of the time, but it seems like the office hours are kind of fairly lively in terms of questions, which is great. So yeah, keep it up, and we'll be here. So bye everybody, and talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.